Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to my Ferrari 360 Modena with Capristo Stage 3 exhaust. So if you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. I really hope you enjoy it. And if you like this kind of content with an Italian exotic and my other cars, two AMG Mercedes, it'd be great to have you as a subscriber. So in this video, we're going to talk about a phenomenon which I have named manual madness. Manual madness is an affliction that affects a number of YouTubers, and the symptoms of this particular affliction are an obsession, almost pathological obsession with manual transmissions to the exclusion of everything else. So much so that they will convert perfectly good cars into manual, spending fortunes doing it. So one of the results of this is that prices for manual versions of certain Ferraris, the F355, the 360 and the F430, command hugely greater prices than their F1 or single clutch equivalents. So let's take a step back. Let's look at all the different technologies of gearboxes, and then we'll talk a little bit more about why I think this is madness. So a while ago I did a video about the different types of transmissions, explaining how they all worked. So let's take a look at a clip from that.
Here are the four key components of a transmission system: the engine, the clutch, the gearbox and the differential. We need a clutch because sometimes the wheels are stationary, but the engine must be running at all times. In a manual car, pressing the clutch pedal disengages the clutch plate from the flywheel, and releasing it allows torque to be applied gradually to the gearbox and wheels. In an electro-hydraulic clutch, the clutch pedal is replaced by a hydraulic actuator which is operated electrically. The third type of clutch is a torque converter, in which an impeller spun by the engine induces, by means of a viscous fluid, motion in a second impeller which drives the gearbox. There are two main types of gearbox: a traditional gearbox in which one shaft is shifted in order to change the ratios. In this diagram, when the blue gears at the bottom are shifted into the red positions, it changes from a low ratio to a high ratio. The second type of gearbox is an epicyclic gearbox, which consists of a sun wheel in the centre, planet wheels around it, and an annulus or ring gear. Restricting the motions of each of these components using clutches produces different ratios. A full manual transmission consists of a manual clutch and a traditional manually shifted gearbox. The clutch pedal controls the position of the clutch plate against the flywheel, and the gear stick selects the various ratios in the gearbox. In a fully automatic transmission, the engine is connected through a viscous coupling to a gearbox consisting of either one or more epicyclic components. A computer known as a transmission control unit takes inputs from the engine, the throttle position and the wheels in order to control the gear ratios. In a dual clutch transmission, you have two separate clutches controlling two separate gearboxes, one for the odd gears and one for the even gears. Switching the clutches will change from one gearbox to the other, therefore changing the ratios. A robotized manual transmission is identical to a traditional manual transmission, except that the clutch pedal and the gear lever are replaced by hydraulic actuators. These are controlled by a TCU, which takes inputs from the engine, the throttle position, and the paddle shifters.
So looking at these four different types of transmission, we've got a torque converter automatic, a dual clutch automatic, a single clutch automatic, and a manual. Now a lot of cars back in the day would give you the option to choose a slush box or torque converter automatic or a manual transmission. And given the choice between a torque converter automatic and a manual gearbox, even I would choose a manual. It's much more involving. An automatic transmission is fine if you just want to cruise and not particularly get involved in the driving experience, but it certainly isn't much fun compared to a manual. Much less common nowadays is the option to choose between a dual clutch automatic and a manual. So cars like the Porsche 911, some versions of those will give you the option to choose the PDK, which is essentially a dual clutch, or a manual transmission. I think that the choice there is a little bit less clear, quite frankly. Dual clutch transmissions are so good, you can drive them in manual mode with the paddles. Do you really need to have the stick and the clutch? I don't know. For me, it's not a big deal. I think having paddles on the steering wheel or the column is just such a great function, and you still get the involvement of changing gears and being in control of the car. It's just that you don't have to constantly take your hand off the wheel, think about changing gears so much. So I think the argument for a manual compared to a dual clutch automatic is less convincing. But absolutely the least convincing argument for a manual is when you compare it with an F1 transmission. The reason for this? It's the same transmission. It's the same gearbox. Manual 360s or manual 355s have exactly the same gearbox as this one has. It's a manual gearbox. The only thing that's different is that you can change gear with paddles connected to hydraulic actuators, and you don't have to use a clutch pedal. But the gearbox and the involvement is exactly the same. This is why I get so frustrated with, and why I call it manual madness. The whole point about the F355 when it came out was its trick F1 transmission. It was a new thing. It was an amazing thing. You suddenly had this ability to paddle shift your gears, but still retain the involvement and the feel of driving a manual car. The F1 version of the 360 like this was almost $40,000 more expensive than the manual version, because into this car went all the extra electronics, all the extra hydraulics and pipe work to make this amazing F1 system work. And personally, I can't really understand the almost, as I say, pathological dislike for the F1 compared to a manual gearbox when they are so similar and the gearbox is identical. Of course, I think it is absolutely gorgeous to have a gated manual shifter on a classic Ferrari. I think there's nothing better than that. Compared to a slush box automatic, a manual gated shifter on a Ferrari it's a no-brainer. Totally agree, and I have no problem with that. Oh, that was nice. I think what you gain from having a manual transmission in a car like a 355 or a 360 or a 430 is more than outweighed by what you lose. I personally find having to constantly shift a manual gearbox in traffic, or when you're, going around country roads and you don't want to be distracted by, taking your hand off the wheel, I can do without it, quite frankly. So I'm going to stick with my F1 on the 360. The 360 was designed to be an F1 car. A manual transmission was almost a throwback to a previous generation. If you want a manual Ferrari, buy a manual Ferrari. But a 360 or a 355 or an F430, they were designed as F1 cars. And the last thing I'd say is that the Challenge Stradale, which is the street racing hardcore version of this car, does not have a manual transmission. It of course has the F1, because that's what you'd want in a car that is a race car for the road. Let me know in the comments what you think of my thoughts in this video. I think there are arguments to be made for manual transmissions when they are the alternative to a slush box automatic or a dual clutch, less so with a dual clutch as I've explained. But I do not see the benefit of a manual transmission compared to an F1 sequential manual. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to do all the usual things. Don't forget to smash that like. It'd be great to have you as a subscriber. Hit that notification bell. You can follow me on Instagram down here. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.